Alright everybody, Minmax Munchkin back with another video. Today we are going to talk about Cleric Spells. In the previous video we talked about Clerics, and here we are going to cover Cleric's Spells. Now first of all, Clerics are full casters, as we already told in the previous video, so their spell list consists of all level spells that you can imagine. It's a pretty beefy spell list. Most of the spells are contained in the first 5 levels. 6th to 9th, the list goes a bit thin, but so does most of the other full casters' spell lists. So without further ado, let's go and see what do clerics actually get to learn and cast. Cantrips. Clerics. Sorry. Clerics only have 9 cantrips off the bat. Obviously, Unearthed Arcana gives a bit more spells and cantrips, but we are not gonna cover those in these videos. Unearthed Arcana is content for another video. So, all the official cantrips, there are only 9. If I'm not mistaken, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yep. So, which one is the best to take? Without any doubt, that's actually hard to pronounce. Guidance. Guidance is the cantrip that it's a cleric only cantrip. So, well, druids get it too. So those two classes have access to guidance, and in my opinion, this is the best non-combat cantrip. Period. Because if you didn't know up until this point, you basically touch a willing creature, and for the duration of your concentration, which is up to 1 minute, you add 1d4 to one ability check of its choice. So for example, your teammate needs to climb a tree, and before your teammate, your party member, starts climbing the tree, you just touch the teammate, give him guidance, and the DM is going to tell that party member, that player, to either roll an athletics check or maybe acrobatics or some other ability check. And on all of those checks, on the first one actually, the player has the opportunity to add 1d4 to that check. So where does this cantrip actually become ridiculous? Well, mechanically speaking, you can spam this cantrip a lot. I've actually heard of DMs that restrict this cantrip, this particular cantrip, because there are so many opportunities to cast this cantrip, and it kind of like skews the results of the like difficulty checks that DMs place in front of the players. So for example, if DC 15 acrobatics check for a first level player, which has like +5 on acrobatics, you give it like a D4, additional D4. Now it's not a +5, it's closer to +7.5. So there's a big difference. It's like 12.5% difference. It's not actually that small. And yes, guidance is actually one of the ridiculous cantrips that you can get, and you should definitely, in my opinion, if you play a cleric, especially if you play it for the first time, this is the cantrip you should get. So every time you do something that involves, will involve a skill check or an ability check, you just cast guidance on either yourself or your teammates. Now, Spare the Dying, Sacred Flame, Toll the Dead. Spare the Dying, obviously, sometimes you don't have spell slots, or you are not next to your teammate, or even if you are next to your teammate, because this is a touch cantrip, you need to stabilize the creature. Sometimes you don't even want to heal him or her or it. Yeah, there are uses for this cantrip. That's why I think you should be auto-include on most cleric spell lists. For combat spells, for combat cantrips, Sacred Flame I still think is the best. The Xanatars and Sword Coast Adventures added 2 more damage cantrips, Toll the Dead and Ward Radiance. Toll the Dead is kind of on par with Sacred Flame. I still think Sacred Flame is better just because it kind of fits the theme a bit more. Toll the Dead is like a necromancy cantrip, deals necrotic damage. Unless you're playing like a Grave Cleric or a Death Cleric, I don't see how, like for example, Cleric of Life casts a necromancy cantrip. It deals like necrotic damage. It doesn't actually make sense thematically to me. But mechanically you can do it. It's like nothing is stopping you. Either of those has a saving throw. Sacred Flame is a dexterity, deals radiant damage. Toll the Dead is a wisdom, deals necrotic. And if the creature you're casting that cantrip on is missing any hit points, the damage die goes from D8 to D12. Light and Mending are like your utility cantrips. Mending is actually really good because oftentimes you need to fix those small tears or breaks in the objects. And Light is always good in general, especially if you're playing a race that doesn't have dark vision. And oftentimes at least one of your party members is not going to have a dark vision, so it's always good to have this cantrip prepared. Learned, known. These other cantrips, I would say Thaumaturgy, if I pronounce it correctly. That one is good. Resistance is kind of crap, in my opinion. Ward of Radiance is very, very situational and deals a lot, like a Constitution saving throw is one of the most saved Constitution saving throws, so most successful one. So yeah, I would actually skip this. Now for the first level spells, Bless or Bane, there's a reason why Bless is red. I think Bless is just statistically, mechanically better than Bane. Bless adds a 1d4 to ability skill checks, to saving throws and attack rolls of your teammates, while Bane inflicts a minus d4 to 3 creatures on their attack rolls or saving throws. Now, mechanically, if you just compare the two, they kind of like they're the opposite of each other. But Bane kind of like, I think Bless is better because PCs, the player characters, are capable of dealing much more damage than monsters in most cases. So inflicting a minus d4 on saves or attack rolls, well, it has its uses. For example, if you are debuffing and you know that you are going to cast a debuffing some spell that's going to require the monster to cast a saving throw, this one, like Bane, will help you or help your ally do actually succeed in casting that spell. So each spell has got its pros and cons. I think Bless is better, that's it. Healing Word or Cure Wounds, staple level 1 cleric spells, ones that you should rarely, if pretty much never ever not prepare. Even like on late levels when you get better healing magic, healing spells, you should still probably have at least one of these spells prepared. Now, Healing Word, even though it heals less compared to Cure Wounds is 1d8, Healing Word is 1d4. Healing Word has range. 60 feet range is plenty of range. And Cure Wounds requiring you to be in melee range, like right next to the creature that you want to heal. The range is touch, obviously, so you have to be next to the creature. Really lends it limited. And the fact is 1d8 or 1d4 is not much of a difference statistically. In most cases you are pretty much never even going to be able to come even close to matching the damage that monsters deal to your allies. 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons really healing magic really cannot keep up with the damage you receive from the monsters that hit you or cast magic effects or spells on you. So I'd say Healing Word is a bit better, but Cure Wounds is still really good. Guiding Bolt is one of those cleric first level spells that's like really good, like ridiculously good early on, but loses its potency as you level up because yeah, it does upscale. However, as you level up, it kind of like stops being the damage spell. It kind of like starts to be even a buffing, sort of like a buffing utility spell, because on a hit, once you hit with it, the next attack roll made against the target of the spell has the advantage. So you kind of like stop concentrating on the damage, you just cast this spell to help yourself or your allies have advantage on the next attack roll made against the creature. So yeah, it's a really good damage and utility combat buff spell. I think every cleric should have it. The rest of the first level spells obviously detect magic due to the fact that clerics have a ritual casting, so they don't have to waste a spell slot. And command is really good at early levels, even later, because it's such a low level spell. It creates such a powerful effect and oftentimes can turn the tide of the battle, especially if you succeed with this spell on like a really dangerous monster, dangerous opponent. So yeah, I think those are the 5 spells of the first level you should really consider in most cleric builds. The rest of the spells I think are too situational and don't really have such like a general universal effect. Ceremony can be good, for example. Sometimes it's like it can buff your allies, it can you can create holy water, stuff like that. You can change the alignment, but like it's situational. Create or destroy water can be really good. For example, if you are in a desert and there's no water in miles, like, and you are like literally dying from dehydration, create or destroy water, obviously really good. Yeah, a bunch of these first level spells are good. However, these 5 I think are the most, in my opinion, the best ones to consider and prepare. Level 2 is where clerics get a lot of good spells. The 2 most important ones are Aid, at least in my opinion, and Spiritual Weapon. I think every cleric should have these 2 prepared, regardless of their level, even like late level clerics. Aid really scales really well, because you choose up to 3 creatures, and the current and maximum hit points of those creatures increases by 5 on a 2nd level spell slot. Now, if you use a 3rd level spell slot, each creature gets 10. 4th is 15, 5th is 20. You see my point. Clerics get up to 9th level spells, and the higher the spell slot you use, the like progressively more health you give your allies. It really scales super well, and Aid is really like much better on cleric compared to paladins, because clerics get 2nd level spells on a 3rd level compared to paladins who only get them at level 5. So yeah, I mean, even the fact that it's a current and maximum hit points, it synergizes with any other spell or effect that gives you temporary hit points. So yeah, I think this spell is just like super good. Spiritual Weapon, another cleric spell that I think is auto-included in most cleric spell lists, builds, whatever. It's a bonus action evocation. You create a floating weapon that deals 1d8 force damage plus your spellcasting ability modifier. Now, why is this spell so ridiculously good? First of all, it lasts for 1 minute, so it's a combat spell, obviously, but it's not a concentration. It lasts for a full minute, but you don't have to concentrate on it. That's one thing. Another thing, it uses a bonus action to cast. And a third thing is that on subsequent levels you can make melee spell attack using your bonus action. And on top of that you can move it up to 20 feet and repeat the attack. So, like, if you just like read all of this and think about it, this is ridiculous. Because if you upcast it, every turn, for example, on a 3rd level spell slot, like every cleric from 5th level onward, you deal 2d8 plus your spellcasting. On a 4th level, like 7th level cleric can deal a 3d8. So you can see how this spell is like really ridiculous. And on top of that, it's a cleric only spell. No other class has access to this spell, and honestly, if I play a cleric, this is the spell I always take, and I don't care. It's like, it's that good. You should never, in my opinion, not take it. Other than that, from all of this list, I think Hold Person and Prayer of Healing are almost as well auto-include as the other 2 spells. Hold Person paralyzes the humanoid and paralyzes the creatures. All attacks against paralyzed creatures, all hits against paralyzed creatures are critical hits. So yeah, you can see how that will be good. So for example, if somebody else in a party has Bane, and the Bane like coincides with Hold Person, it's synergized because Bane forces the creature to roll a d4 and subtract from the result of their wisdom save. That's how the synergy can be good. Unfortunately, concentration is one of the 5th edition major limitations, and as we know, Bane is also a concentration. So yeah, you cannot concentrate on Bane and any other ability, any other spell that debuffs or buffs your allies. So yeah, that's why I think Bless is better. Still Hold Person and Prayer of Healing, which provides better healing out of combat. It kind of takes a while to cast, but once you cast it, you can heal 2d8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier up to 6 creatures. So all 6 creatures get 2d8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier, which if you think about it, it's like a 2d8 is 9 on average, so your spellcasting ability modifier is at least 3. So 6 creatures can get 12 healing on average, starting from your 3rd level of your cleric. I mean, in my book, that's insanely good. The other 2 spells that you should consider is Lesser Restoration and Zone of Truth. Obviously, all of these other spells have their uses. Calm Emotions can be great. Blindness, Deafness is a ridiculous combat debuff. Augury can be a decent divination spell. Silence can be actually really good in situations where you are fighting wizards or some other spellcasters. They cannot use any spells that have vocal components. So yeah, a lot of these spells are really good. Locate Object as well. Unfortunately, they are situational, and I think that's why these 6 are your primary like a short list of spells that you can choose from. 3rd level spells, moving on. In my opinion, none of these spells are red, so meaning none of these spells are that really good. But among these spells, Beacon of Hope, Dispel Magic, and Revivify. Revivify, obviously, revive magic, that's what clerics should do. This is the first revive spell that's available to any spellcasting class. It's a 3rd level necromancy. All revive magics are necromancies. So yeah, the duration is instantaneous, consumes a 300 gold pieces diamond, and the limitation is that the creature has to be dead for less than a minute. So if the creature has been dead for more than a minute, you cannot use this spell to revive that creature. So this is like one of those spells you prepare, and in the heat of the combat, if your ally dies or like just falls off a cliff or something and dies, you can use this spell and bring him or her back to life. Dispel magic, obviously a really good spell to have, because oftentimes you come across items or just spell effects that can cause problems to your party, and the ability to upcast this spell to automatically end the effects of higher level spells is really good, and that's why I think you should always have Dispel Magic prepared, regardless of the other spells that you have. Beacon of Hope is kind of like, you don't really have to have it prepared all the time, but when you are going in a battle, or you know you're going to be going through an area where for some reason your party is going to be losing hit points, this is the spell to take. The portion that gives the advantage on wisdom and death saves, not that useful. Situational useful, yes. But the most important part of this spell is that they regain the maximum possible hit points from any healing. So, for example, the range is 30 feet. You choose any number of creatures in that range. So, naturally, you choose your party members. And during the concentration time, any healing that they get, for example, you cast this spell at the end of short rest, they get their short rest dice, and all of that dice is like maxed. So they get maximum healing, and which is really, really good. The rest of the spells on a third level, there are a bunch of good spells, a bunch of situationally really, really great spells. But I think Mass Healing Word, the name just like describes itself. Spirit Guardians is really good combat spell. You can like protect yourself. Obviously you have to be good or neutral alignment. So yeah, you deal some radiant damage. There's a wisdom save. If they fail, they take damage. On a success, they take half. Mass Healing Word obviously heals 1d4 plus your spellcasting modifier. High level, not a lot of healing, but up to 6 creatures. This is like situational, not a lot of times that you are going to be faced with the situation that you have to pull up 6 creatures like in a same turn up from the dead, but there are situations where Mass Healing Word can be useful. Still, I think it's one of the better spells. And sending, obviously you can send messages on the same plane up to 25 words. Any distance, just like has to be on the same plane. Even though if the target is on a different plane, there's only a 5% chance that the message doesn't arrive. So yeah, basically you just use this spell to communicate to great distances. It's basically like a D&D 5th edition cell phone, kind of. Like you send very, very short SMS messages. Magic Circle, final spell that you should consider for most cleric builds. On a third level spell, you can read it yourself. Basically, you can protect your group and yourself from these creatures, or you can trap these types of creatures in this 10-foot radius, 20-foot tall cylinder of magical energy. There are a lot of situations where this spell is really great. Now moving on to 4th level spells. 4th level spells for cleric, similar to most other classes that have access to them, is like a weird place. There's there are actually 2 good spells in my opinion, but they are also kind of situational. The only one that's kind of universal is Divination, because this spell is, due to the fact that it's a high level spell, fairly high. You can ask your god the single question, and the god has to provide a truthful reply. In this case, the god is played by DM because, yeah, I mean, there's no really god, it's all imaginary, especially in D&D. I mean, there's probably, I don't know, man, I'm not getting into religion, I'm just saying, there's no Thor, there's no Loki, there's no other god that your cleric is really... It doesn't really exist, you know. I mean, or maybe it does. Who knows? Anyway, moving on. Divination, we already covered that. Guardian of Faith is one of those spells that you cast on long rest. That's why I said it's situational. Luckily, you have to long rest every day. I mean, you don't have to, but you are strongly inclined to long rest, because if you don't, you risk one level of exhaustion, and those can accumulate pretty fast. So yeah, right before you go to bed, you go to sleep, you cast this large spectral guardian that hovers in an unoccupied space, and any hostile creature that moves within 10 feet of that guardian must pass a dexterity save. It takes full 20 radiant damage on a failed, or half damage on a success. The guardian can deal up to 60 damage total. Now, unfortunately, this spell is really good on the level that you get 4th level spells. It doesn't scale. That's the main problem with this spell. That's why I said 4th level spells for Cleric and many other classes of weird space. Banishment can be good, like very universal. But however, it's even then it's kind of situational. There are like probably there are settings out there without like planes, just like material planes. So this spell is probably useless. So yeah, I mean, in most settings this spell is going to work wonders, but obviously in some it's not going to be that useful. Pretty much you just banish a creature to another demi-plane, and if you manage to maintain your concentration for up to a minute, the target stays on that demi-plane forever. You basically erase that creature from the from existence, kind of, which is a really good spell. Maybe I should put Banishment before Guardian of Faith. I mean, technically speaking, it's a more universal spell. It's a more useful spell in more situations. So yeah, Freedom of Movement is the last spell you should consider preparing. It's kind of very situational as well, because not a lot of times that you are going to... I mean, kind of. I mean, there are campaigns with a lot of difficult terrain, a lot of spells and magical effects that reduce the speed or cause you to be paralyzed or restrained. It happened in my campaigns, it will probably happen in the future. So yeah, this spell situationally is very good. Luckily, there are a lot of situations... Those situations happen very often where this spell can be great. It lasts for 1 hour and it's not a concentration. That's the main drawing point of this spell. Moving on to the 5th level spells, 2 spells that you should probably always have prepared are Scrying and Greater Restoration. For those of you that don't know, Scrying is one of those divination spells that many DMs and GMs have like really like hard times with. And many player characters, many parties also have hard times with when the DM uses the spell against them. So basically, without reading too much into it, you can force the target to make a wisdom saving throw, and if the target fails, the spell creates basically an invisible sensor within 10 feet of that target. So you can see here through the sensor as if you are there. The sensor moves with the target. You kind of like put the tracking beacon on the target of this spell. And why is this ridiculous? Well, for example, if you manage to hear of your big bad boss that you are facing at the end of the campaign, or for example, if some kind of Lich King or Lich Fiend or whatever, and you have part of their undead flesh, yeah, this spell becomes ridiculous because you can spy on those targets for like 10 minutes every day, even more if you have more 5th level spell slots. It can be up to DMs. Some DMs intentionally debuff, like nerf this spell by saying that you track that target and that target sleeps or does nothing. If we are to be fair, DMs actually legitimately do have a hard time with this, because it really depends on what the target of this spell is doing at the period of the 10 minutes that you can maintain concentration of this spell. So yeah, I mean, from one hand, on one hand, DMs have a problem. On the other hand, players have a problem. The fact remains, this spell is ridiculous in the hands of those that know what to do with it. Now, Greater Restoration. Obviously, the name says you kind of like heal your allies, but this is not about hit points. You basically touch a creature, you can reduce its exhaustion level by 1 or end one of the following effects. Effects can be charmed, petrified, it can be cursed, reduction to an ability score, or one effect that reduces the creature's hit point maximum. Now, 5th level spells, it's like a 13th level Cleric, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it's 11th. Well, doesn't matter. So 5th level spells, that's like a fairly, like a medium level character, and at this point you are probably coming across a lot of places or monsters or NPCs that are against you, that will do harm to you, and that inflict these kinds of conditions upon you. And that's why Greater Restoration is really good to have always. Like, you pretty much... This is the spell that you have permanently prepared, just in case, because if you come across a Medusa, and the Medusa petrifies you, like, what can you do? Like, if you don't have something to unpetrify the target, for example, Greater Restoration, the target is toast. So, yeah, I mean, this spell is really good to have. Raise Dead is another revive magic. In this case, the target can be dead up to 10 days, and if the soul has been dead for more than 10 days, again, you cannot revive. The spell also neutralizes poison and cures non-magical diseases. So it's not only revive, it's a bit like all-in-one, 3-in-1 spell. Doesn't remove magical effects, but yeah, I mean, 10 days to revive a creature. Unfortunately, there are some like temporary drawbacks, but those pretty much vanish very soon. Every long rest, the penalty is reduced by 1. So yeah, Raise Dead is kind of like almost red itself as well, but I would still probably not make it red, because Revivify can like do the similar work in a pinch. Raise Dead is for those situations where you don't have it prepared, but you do have 10 days, and in the span of those 10 days you have enough time to just like wake up one day, prepare the spell, revive the creature, and move on. The other spells that I would consider is Mass Cure Wounds and Commune. Mass Cure Wounds, obviously the name says itself. I'm just going to open it. Up to 6 creatures, 30-foot radius, 3d8 plus your spellcasting ability. The most important part is that it can be upcasted and increases the healing. Pretty good, pretty self-explanatory. Now, Commune is one of those also problematic divination spells. Kind of situational. It's a ritual, so you don't have to waste a spell slot. You contact the deity and you can ask up to 3 questions, which have to be asked in a manner for a yes or no answer. Now, this gives DMs also a lot of headaches, because oftentimes players ask very, very critical questions that can make or break the DM's campaign. And if the player asks a really good question and the DM like shouldn't really lie, because the spell says so, yeah, it kind of like the whole campaign goes down the drain, and the players just know, okay, we have to do this, and the campaign is over, and all the mystery is gone, all the suspension and all the built up tension, everything gone, just with a single spell. Divination magic is really problematic type of magic in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. Fortunately, that's a fairly high level magic, therefore it only works when your characters get up to fairly high levels. Now, for the other 5th level spells, I would say Legend Lore can be useful. It's also a divination. You can find like epic level information from legends and tales from like distant past about certain places or whatever. Yeah, planar binding can be good in certain situations. Hello can be good. Hello is kind of like similar to Paladin's Divine Sense. Gas, however it's pronounced, can be good. I'd say it's also situational, but there are a lot of situations where it can work. So yeah, kind of considered this one too, but for some reason I just didn't include it in the list here. Now moving on to the 6th level spells. Heal and True Seeing right off the bat. True Seeing gives you a true sight, you or any other creature, I think. Yeah, the target, you can cast it on yourself. So you see, you have a true sight, and you also see into the ethereal plane within range of 120 feet. So basically all invisible critters, all monsters that are invisible for whatever reason, and all hidden secret doors, magic that are hidden by magic, you see all of it. True Seeing is one of those spells that you should have prepared once you reach 6th level spells with the Cleric. The other one that you should probably also have prepared at most, if not all times, is Heal. It's just a flat out 70 hit points heal on a target that you cast a spell on. It obviously can be upcasted, and it also adds blindness, deafness, or any disease that's affecting the target at the moment. Now, the other spells are kind of situational. Hero's Feast can be good in situations where your party is preparing to fight a big bad final boss like Ancient Red Dragon, and yeah, you know that you are going to like encounter a very deadly encounter, and yeah, you cast this spell. It's a bit pricey, but if you know that your party is going to be in grave danger, this is the spell to prepare and cast. Word of Recall can be good if your party finds themselves in deadly situation and you have been very diligent in your preparations. You have prepared a safe haven. You just cast this spell again, and you instantly teleport back to the safe place, safe space. Forbidden's also very good spell. Unfortunately, very situational. Probably the most situational of these three. You can read it yourself. Basically a huge area where you can prohibit any magical travel, teleportation, and any of these types of creatures also they can take radiant damage while in this area. The rest of the spells, harm can be good. Obviously you deal damage. Like all of these spells are kind of situational. I personally consider these three above all of these others. Planar Ally can be also very good depending on the situation. Now 7th level spells is where you get the fabled Conjure Celestial. Now if you don't know, it says in the, well, I'm gonna open the spell obviously. It's a challenge rating 4 or lower. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of Celestials in Monsters Manual, Volo's Guide, and the other books that have monster stats. However, there's one monster. I think I can find it. Yep. There we go. So this is a challenge rating for a Celestial. There you go. You can read it fully. It's a very there's the stat block. I'm gonna decrease the zoom a bit so you can read it more. There we go. It has a lot of hit points. 97. That's like a serious amount of hit points. A lot of armor class. Decent speed on the ground. Ridiculous flying speed. Abilities through the roof. A lot of damage immunities. Damage resistance obviously. Decent saving throws. 3. It has True Sight, Passive Perception, decent one, Telepathy, innate spellcasting, a lot of very useful spells. Basically, A very, very useful creature to have by your side. Sorry. So that creature appears in a space that you can see. It lasts for 1 hour. Or until it drops to 0 hit points, obviously. It's friendly to you. You can roll initiative for it. It obeys any of your verbal commands that you issue to it. There's no action required on your part as long as you don't go against its alignment. Now, quotals, however it's pronounced, are lawful good. So some DMs can be kind of like pricky with this. But all in all, just the ability to have additional critter for 1 hour, additional like creature, with these many like very, very good abilities, features, spells, attacks, whatever actions, it's a really good ally to have. And on top of that, if you upcast this spell on a 9th level spell slot, you can summon a celestial of up to challenge rating 5. Now, if you don't know, challenge rating 5 is actually a unicorn. Unicorn 5e, there we go. It's an even more ridiculous monster because it has legendary actions. It's a legendary creature, also lawful good, and it doesn't have a lot of hit points, that's true, but due to the fact that it has a lot of these like legendary actions and a lot of these additional features, it's also a good one to have by your side. I'd still probably take Quotal over Unicorn. Is it actually pronounced Quotal? Doesn't matter. Still, either of those are really good, and that's why I think this spell is it's the one that you should almost always have prepared, regardless of the situation you are going into. Regenerate, Resurrection, obviously. Regenerate, the name says itself. It regenerates lost limbs, heals, has minor healing. It can reattach severed body parts. Yeah, I mean, basically, kind of like regenerate the severed limbs and heal yourself or anybody else for a low amount of hit points. Resurrection, the name says itself. In the case of Resurrection, the target can be dead of up to a century, so 100 years. Yeah, that's a lot. So basically, if you have Resurrection prepared and you do have sufficient amount of gold, so you don't care, you kind of like don't need Raise Dead. Raise Dead is obviously less expensive, but yeah, I mean, Resurrection magic, clerics, that's like that's just the name of the game. The other spells I'd consider Firestorm, because yeah, it's a fairly high level evocation damage magic, but the ability to have up to 10 10-foot flaming cubes that are arranged as you wish is huge. So basically, in a range of up to 150 feet, which is a huge range, you can pick up to 10 creatures that are inside of that range, regardless of their position, on your left, on your right, behind you, in front of you. And you place 10-foot flaming cubes in their space, and each creature in the area of those cubes has to make a dex saving throw. Obviously, this is like fire magic. And on the failed saving throw takes 7d10 or half on a successful. And the additional part is that like this spell gives you the ability to control whether you want to put plants and trees on fire, which it's kind of like one of the neat features of a high level spell. Like high level magic should have these like secondary features that come in handy in certain situations. So that said, Temple of the Gods and Plane Shift. Temple of the Gods is like a temporary sanctuary you can prepare that lasts for 24 hours. It does have a huge casting time, but if you find yourself in a hostile area and you can spare 1 hour to cast this spell, it basically protects you, kind of like provides a decent protection against creatures that you designate against this temple. So yeah, if the creature of chosen types attempts to enter the temple, must make a charisma saving throw. On a failed save, it cannot enter the temple for 24 hours. Even if the creature succeeds on a saving throw, the creature takes it's hindered. Whenever it makes an attack roll, ability check, or a saving throw, it must roll a d4 and subtract the number rolled from the d20 roll. So this is like kind of a bane and a protection in a single spell. That's why it's a fairly high level spell. That's why it lasts for 24 hours. Yeah, it's a really good spell, and not many spells can actually affect it. Disintegrate obviously destroys it, as it says here. So yeah, Temple of Gods is really good to have, even though it's situational. Plane Shift, obviously the name says itself, you can travel the planes, you can become a planar traveling character, you can bring up to 8 willing creatures with you when you cast the spell. Obviously, a lot of campaigns, especially like in settings that revolve around planar magic and planar storylines, this spell is going to be very useful. Now, 8th level spell, Anti-Magic Field. The only one you should, like, honestly have prepared at most times, if not always, because as the name says itself, you become virtually immune to magic for 1 hour. Now, it is a concentration, and if somebody hits you with just a blunt weapon, you can lose this spell. So it's a high investment, but the reward is also high. So high risk, high reward. That's why I think you should always have this spell prepared, just in case you need to cast it. Obviously, 9th level spells. Clerics don't get access to Wish. It would actually be too much if they could, if they would have. On the other hand, they have access to Astral Projection, Gate, Mass Heal, and True Resurrection. Mass Heal is obviously the one that you kind of like need to have prepared all the times. Probably when you reach level 9 spells, you can exchange Heal. Probably don't even need to have Heal, you can just have Mass Heal, because at that point, at least a couple of your player characters in your party are going to have more than 150, maybe even 200 hit points. So 700 hit points flat really get spent really fast. So yeah, there's that. True Resurrection, the name says itself, you can revive a creature that has been dead for no longer than 200 years. So 2 centuries. The spell closes all wounds, neutralizes all poisons, cures all diseases, lifts all curses. It replaces damaged or missing organs and limbs. If the creature was undead, it is restored to its undead form. That's why it's actually called True Resurrection, because it legitimately resurrects the creature that you use this spell on. On the downside, this spell costs 25,000 gold in diamonds. So yeah, it's actually, you are not going to cast this spell very often. Trust me on that one. Other than that, Gate and Astral Projection are kind of situational as well. Due to the fact that they are 9th level spells, they are very powerful. If the situation calls for it, they can be really useful. And due to the fact that clerics can prepare different spells every day, there you go. That said, this is it for cleric. I think I covered it all. This is just like my opinion on cleric spell list. You obviously don't have to agree. If you have different opinions, let me know in the comments down below. What are the spells that you think don't deserve to be on this like short list? And what spells you would include that I didn't include. Also, if you like this type of content, if you liked my presentation, like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell button. All that usual stuff that you do on YouTube. And with that said, MinMax Munchking out, and see you soon.